I don't think there's a video that goes by without me being asked a particular question. Out of all the bikes that you have, if you could only have one, if you could only choose one, which would it be? Now, I made a video sort of similar to this a year or so back between the T120 and the Interceptor 650, and I've got to admit I sort of dodged the bullet that time. I didn't really give a straight answer, which is why people are probably still asking me. And of course, the more bikes are added to the channel's stable, the more I'm asked this question. I can't avoid it anymore, I know that, so here we go. Last night my partner asked me what video I was making for Wednesday. She has a week's holiday this week and she was inquiring to see if I needed any help. And when I told her, she knew straight away, first guess, she knew which bike I would keep if I could only have one bike, which surprised the hell out of me because she never listens to a word I say, so if she can get it right, I'm sure there are already quite a few people out there who know which bike it would be. Now, this is just my own personal choice. Everyone has different criteria, different things, different reasons that make a particular make or model important to them, so it's probably going to be a different answer to the one that a lot of other people would give. But this is my choice. This is the bike that I would keep if I had to get rid of all but one. Now, I would say I'm not including the T100 in this. It's not a current bike. Mine hasn't been used for some 2 years now. It's just an ongoing project. And it's a model that hasn't been in production for some 5 years. To a huge degree, my heart's always ruled my head where bikes are concerned. If it hadn't, I would probably have never had a bike. I would have just been practical and had a car. But having said that, if I was to only have one bike, there would be some practical issues to tackle. In such a case, it wouldn't be just a toy. And looking back to the years when I could only have one bike, depending on my financial situation at the time, the bike had to fit some criteria of practicality. It wasn't just about how it looked. And that's the criteria that I'm going to use to judge in this case. The bike's got to be a competent all-rounder on modern British roads. So I'm going to start at the top and work my way down to the bike that I would choose. Just going through each model and explaining sort of what I like about the bike, but the main reasons that wouldn't be my choice if I was only to have one bike. You may agree or disagree, that's entirely up to you, we're all different. But people have been asking me this question and this is my answer. Now, for me personally, as much as I love the bike, the Bobber would have to be the first to go. It is, I think, quite possibly one of the best looking bikes on the market. And I've often thought that if you were in the market for a motorcycle but you couldn't actually ride a motorcycle, the Bobber would be your best bet. Whenever I have friends or relatives visiting and we end up taking a look at the bikes in the garage, the Bobber is always the bike that grabs everyone's attention. And I have to admit, it's one of those bikes that you could just sit in the garage, drink in hand, for hours on end looking at it. It is gorgeous. It's a work of art, and as it stands at the moment, I've got no intention of parting with it, but those looks come at a cost. The engine has a very different tune to the T120. It has a lot more mid-range power and the handling is fantastic, but the bike has very limited ground clearance. In the first week or so of me having this bike, I ripped off one of the foot pegs, and from then on I was always very mindful of that limited ground clearance. It has that wonderful mid-range power and trick handling, but you can't use it because of that ground clearance. You can't even use half of it. Then there's long distance comfort. Again, because of that low slung design, suspension is minimal. And I personally found I can't do much more than 50 or 60 miles before I need to get off. There's no real provision for luggage, and fuel range is very, very limited. In effect, this bike is a sort of a one-trick pony. Yeah, you could probably use it for your commute to work, and it's certainly the perfect bike for day trips or run down to your local bike cafe, providing you're only travelling alone, because of course it can't take a pillion. But for me, that's the limit of its uses. That's all it's good for. It's not a competent all-rounder in my book. So as I say, if push come to shove and I could only have one bike, the Bobber would be the first to go up on the market. Ownership of the T120 has been a bittersweet affair. It is a good all-rounder. Plenty of power and decent handling. Fuel economy is pretty good, but unfortunately the element of trust has disappeared from our relationship. And if you could only have one bike, trust is a very important factor. This bike right from day one has had more warranty claims than any other vehicle I've ever owned. It's also been the subject of more factory recalls than any other vehicle I've ever owned. Recalls prompted by a low quality bodged wiring system, an area of the bike where corners should not have been cut but so clearly were. An electrical system that I'm sure still has some nasty surprises in store. And now we have this mysterious spectre of gearbox faults. I know of a lot of Bonneville owners that have parted with the bikes because they simply don't trust them anymore. For me, the T120 is sort of like a soon-to-be ex-girlfriend. You're still in love with her and the prospect of parting tears you apart. But you know you can't trust her, and sooner or later there's a good chance she's going to let you down. And if you can only have one bike in your garage, that's not the kind of bike you want it to be. Now, the next bike to go for me was a difficult one. The Bullet is more than the sum of its parts. It's more than a motorcycle. Whenever I open the garage door, it's like a friendly little puppy sitting there expectantly waiting to greet me. A faithful little pet that just gives you its all and expects nothing in return. As it stands, I am a proud Bullet owner, or Classic 500 owner, as I'm sure some will remind me. Bullet looks gorgeous, although I'm sure to some it's an acquired taste. Performance and handling are adequate. It will of course take a pillion, although I removed the pillion seat. And fuel consumption is fantastic, giving over 90 miles to the gallon. The Bullet is a bike that feeds the soul, but as I'm sure you'll have guessed by now, there is another bike in my stable that I think personally would be the most sensible choice if I could only have one bike. It's not a reflection on the Bullet, it's just the fact that the Interceptor is a better bike. If I'm being completely honest, aesthetically, the Interceptor is probably the worst looking bike out of the four. I don't mean that it's a bad looking bike, I just mean the others aesthetically have the edge. But beauty is only skin deep, and what the Interceptor lacks in looks, it more than makes up for it in other ways. Fuel consumption is easily in the 80s per imperial gallon. It is, in my opinion, the best handling bike of the four, with no limitations of ground clearance. It has more than enough performance for a bike of this class, and so far, touch wood, it's proved to be 100% reliable, with no warranty issues whatsoever over a year and a half. I will concede that fuel range is a little bit limited by that small tank, but it is better than that of the Bobber. I live in a densely populated country where you're never far from a fuel station, so for me it's not an issue. The Interceptor is a very capable all-rounder. It's fast enough to cope with just about any traffic situation it's likely to encounter here in the UK. It's also a very satisfying bike to ride when you're just riding for pleasure. Obviously, it will commute. It'll take a pillion, no problem. And it's low maintenance. In fact, with the possible exception of the Bullet, I reckon it's going to be the cheapest bike to run long term. And if I could only have one bike, those are the attributes that would be the most important to me personally. So there it is, you've got your answer. If I could only have one bike, which one would I choose? It would be the Interceptor. Once again, thank you so much for watching this and my other videos, and in doing so helping to support this channel. I sincerely hope that you've enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you have, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And if you do subscribe, don't forget to hit the notification bell and make sure that all your alerts are enabled. I will of course be back on Friday, so until then, please ride safely, and I'll see you soon.